This video is on multiplying a decimal by a power of 10. So to begin with, it's very important that you know exactly what a power of 10 is, and that is just 10 raised to any whole number. So for example, 10 to the power of 1 is 10. And 10 to the power of 2 just means 10 times 10, which is 100. 10 to the power of 3, 10 times 10 times 10, and we can really start with previous power of 10, which is 10 squared, and we're just timesing by 10 one more time. So that would give me 1,000. And you can see that the number of zeros is increasing with each time, and also the number of zeros correlates to the power. 3 zeros, power of 3. So if I had 10 to the power of 6, it would be 1 with 6 zeros, or 1 million. So we are going to be multiplying decimals by a power of 10. And in our first example, we're multiplying just by 10. Now, I'm going to do this a longer method, just for your understanding, and then we'll turn it into a nice little quick method to get these done. They're actually nice quick questions. We're going to multiply 3.57 by 10, and to do that, I'm going to actually look at each of the individual numbers in this decimal, so the 3 units, the 5/10ths and the 7/100ths, and look at what happens to each of those when we times them by 10. So if you take 3 units and you times by 10, you're going to get 30. So that means the 3 units would now become 3 tens. If I take my 5/10ths, I've got 5/10ths here, and I times them by 10, the tens will cancel, and I'll be left with 5 units. So I've gone from 5/10ths to 5 units, and I'm gone from 3 units to 3 tens. So both these numbers have gone up one place value. And then I've got 7/100ths times by 10. The 10 goes into 100 10 times, so I'm left with 7/10ths, or 0.7. So I now have 7/10ths. So once again, the 7 has gone from hundredths to tenths. It's jumped up one place value. So timesing by 10 has made each of those numbers increase their place value by 1. So the answer is 35.7. I don't really want to do that long method every time, so I'm hoping you'll be looking at the question and the answer and thinking, can you think of a faster way to how I go from 3.57 to 35.7 when I times by 10? Alright, in our next example, let's move on, we're going to multiply 0.17 by 100. Okay, so not by 10 this time, by 100. So we're going to look at, firstly, we've got 1/10, we can see it in the tenths position, and we've got 7/100ths. So 1/10, let's look at what happens when we times that by 100. 10 goes into 100 10 times. So the 1/10th has now become 1/10. Okay, so I'll put a 1 in the tens column. I've got 7/100ths, and I want to times by 100. The hundreds will cancel, and I'll be left with 7 units. And this actually makes sense, because the 1, because we're timesing by 100, instead of each of the numbers going up by 1 place value, they've gone up by 2. 1, that's for 10, and then times by 10 again, a second place value. The 7 has gone from hundredths to tenths, and then on to units. So the answer is 17. Once again, I want you to look at the 0.17, and think about how we went from that to 17 by timesing by 100. Because we want a quicker method. We don't want to draw up a table every time. Alright, last example. 15.6. We've got 1/10, because it's 15, and 5 units, and 6/10ths. So let's take the 1/10, and we are going to multiply that 1/10 by 1,000. That gives me 10,000. So in the tens of thousands column, I'll put 1/10, because that means, I'll put 1, because that means I've got one lot of 10,000. Then I'll take the 5 units, and when you times 5 units by 1,000, you get 5,000. So in the thousands column, I'll put a 1. I'll put a 5, sorry. And then I've got 6/10 times 6/10 by 1,000. The 10 goes into 1,000 100 times. 6 lots of 100 is 600. So in the hundreds column, I'm going to put a 6. Now we know the answer isn't 156, okay, because we know we had one lot of 10,000. So obviously we have to fill in the zeros so that we have 15,600. We've got 1,000 plus 5,000 plus 600 is 15,600. I want you to finally look at this example and think, can you figure out how we go from 15.6 timesing by 1,000 to get 15,600? And I'm hoping you realize that instead of drawing a table and making each of the digits move up a place value, which is what's happening, you can actually come up with a quick method where instead of moving the numbers up a place value, we just move the decimal place. And the number of place values that each number jumps was dependent on the power of 10. So when it was 1,000, the 1 went from tens to 1, 2, 3, tens of thousands. So if there are 3 zeros, then the decimal place can jump 1, 2, 3 places from between the 5 and the 6 to over here. And we've got these empty humps. Empty humps we have to fill with zeros. So that's what gives me my 15,600. If I look at the previous examples and I want to use this quick method, 100, well that would mean the place values jump. The numbers would jump 2 place values, but instead we're going to just move the decimal place 2 places. So I'm going to start over here, 1, 2, and I would end up behind the 17. The decimal place would be behind the 17, which is exactly what happened. In this example, we're timesing by 10, so we would just move the decimal place 1 over, which is exactly what happened in this question. We ended up getting 35.7. I have no idea why that decimal place keeps disappearing. Let's have a look at some examples using this quicker method. Okay, so we are timesing by 100, so or 10 to the power of 2, so that means we'll move the decimal place once, twice, so 1, 2, and where it lands, put a nice over-exaggerated new decimal place. That's at the end of the number, so I don't actually have to write it down in my answer. 286. Here I'm multiplying by 10, so just one zero, so I can move it once over. So I'll get 70.3. Here I'm multiplying by 1,000, so we're going to jump 3 places. 1, 2, 3, and put a new decimal place where I land, right here. Any empty spaces must be filled with a 0. There's 1 empty space here, so we get 90. And I've got one last example here where we have to fill in the blank. I've got 0.375, and I get 3,750. So the decimal place has gone from here all the way past the 5. So we've gone and jumped once, twice, 3 times, and then one more for that last 0 that we've got over here. So 4 jumps would mean that I need to times by 1 with 4 zeros, or 10,000. Another perfectly good answer would have been 10 to the power of 4. Alright, that's it basically for how to multiply by a power of 10. It's very important that you count how many zeros are in that power of 10, otherwise you might jump the decimal place the wrong number of times, and this will tell you how many jumps to take. Don't forget to fill in any empty humps with zeros, and mark your new decimal point clearly.